Hello, everyone. I was hoping to get a little sip of tea in before you all, before I started talking, but the frog in my throat remains. Hello, darlings. It's so good to be with you again. I've been off for 2 weeks. A family coming from Austria, which was very exciting. Friends coming from the coast of North Carolina, very fun. And now we're back together again, and I'm awfully glad about that. We're talking about something, too, that's so important called control. And we're going to talk all about this because control is not what you think it is. The ego, hello, Ronald. Good morning to you, dear heart. And I see all my friends clicking in, so I'm just so glad to be with you today. Guys, those of you that are listening to me on Blog Talk Radio, I'm also broadcasting over Facebook Live, and I'm talking to some of the people who are writing in. If you, too, want to be part of that, all you have to do is get on Facebook Live under Real Talk with Martha Novak, and you'll see us. You can also click into this live show on my website, which is marthanovak.com. So let's do a quick prayer to get us all on the same page. This show has certainly practical and spiritual leanings, and secular leanings. However, it's real important to me to get nice and clear and on the same page with you. So let's do that, and then we'll launch off into our material. Dear God, thank you so much for bringing us all here together again. We are enormously grateful as we talk about this important issue, control, our need to have it. And we ask now that we open to see, hear, sense, and know what you would have us do. The steps in front of us, one at a time. Open our mind to new ideas and new ways of doing things, new ways of being. Change our minds about the things that are limiting us. For we are of two minds, the ego child's mind, which is the fear-based experience of you, and the higher self mind, which is the love-based experience for you, of you. And our quest, our divine quest, is to go from the ego child's mind to the higher self mind. And this is what the show is about. Open us now to what's here for us, through our listeners, through me as a teacher, through it all. We are listening to you. We thank you so much. Now we open ourselves to see, hear, sense, and know what you would have us do as we open to the truth that lies in your enlightenment. And we thank you. And so it is. Amen. Aloha, Jay. Hello, darling. And James, thank you so much. Yes, here I am back. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in today. Y'all sweet cheering section. I sure do appreciate it with all my heart. Now, we're talking about control, and the ego child's mind has control wrong. It really does. Well, now we've learned it for a really good reason. You know, when we were little kids, and thank you, darling. I don't know whether I'm totally in control. Jay says I'm totally in control. I don't know about that, but we're going to talk about it. That's the part I'm sure about. When we're little kids and everything seems, if we strip it down past personality, everything is a force. Even a lot of learning is a force. If our mother and dad raise their voices, that's a force. And we are aware that we have no force. We're little kids, right? We are the undeveloped whole, which means we are the undeveloped love of our highest selves. But it is undeveloped. So what we have a call to in life, if indeed we are called, you guys obviously are, what we have the opportunity to do, the privilege to do, you're going to hear that word several times today, the privilege to do is go from the fear-based self to the love-based self and see things from a really different perspective than the ego child's mind has arranged. Now, look, I am really glad you have your issues. Hello, Denise. Oh, aren't you sweet, my darlings? You all are just the best team. You really are. I just love working with you. Okay, so the thing is, we have a really good reason for having these issues. We did the best we could. Somebody else in our family had them, probably a mom or dad, however subtly or grandiose, and we took those on because we found we couldn't just be vulnerable, sweet love and who we were. That wasn't even seen or even appreciated necessarily. And it's not supposed to be. We think in our child's mind it is, but it's not supposed to be. Why? Well, if somebody told you who you were and they were right, you'd have no quest. You'd have no journey. Every day would be Christmas, and you wouldn't grow. And the whole point of doing all of this is for us to take responsibility for ourselves, for this marvelous moment, for you to realize the sacredness of it, because it won't ever come again, and to make the most of it. And guess what? When you're doing that, you're creating your life, and there's no need to control, because you have a need to control because of fear, the fear-based self. You see? The fear-based self, the ego child's mind, the part of you that still thinks like a child, and the love-based mind that is the higher self mind, the more global mind, and the one that gets on with creating a wonderful life for yourselves. We're going to talk about that because when we get into this territory, it becomes very subtle, doesn't it? It's enormously subtle. One can easily bleed into the other. You might easily fall prey to the battle for control as a kid because mom and dad did it. And we never realize, wait a minute, it's a battle for control here. It's a battle for attention. Instead of going, wait a minute, what are my other choices here? And there are many of them. In the ego child's mind, we're just trying to survive. There is one thing we're trying to do: survive. And many of us, as adults, are still caught in that survival mechanism. Now, I'm going to skip over to something in a moment. We're going to talk about, and you might want to have a pen and paper or something right in front of you so we can play with this together. Let's talk about the psychologist Abraham Maslow for a minute. And we're not going to stay here, but I want to put this on the table. So, he had this triangle, right? Top of the triangle was self-actualization, achieving individual potential. By the way, that's what this show is about, because that's not fear-based, that's love-based. That's the highest self. The second little slot under that was esteem. You had to have self-esteem and accept it from others, right? Nice if you give it to others. Underneath that, he defined a sense of belonging, love, affection, being part of a group, even the human race. Underneath that, safety. We had a sense of needing to be safe, to have shelter, to be removed from danger. And the last block in this triangle is physiological. We need health, we need food, we need sleep, we need those things to sustain us. Now, here's the interesting part. The lower you go in this triangle, the more important control is. I thought that was a real interesting construct when we think of it in terms of consciousness and what we're learning here about control. All right? You guys are listening to this show not to stay in those lower things. You have survived, by the way. And it's not a continual process of survival. It's now a continual process of creating the life you want, of being responsible for yourself, for realizing the sacred moment and the energy right here, right now, to be used the way you need to use it. But first, before we get on to that exciting concept, I've got to put on the table all the subtle ways we're not allowing that to happen. Because if we can call these things out, it's like the Western that I grew up with, this town ain't big enough for both of us. Come on out of that saloon and face me, we gotta do that, kids. I know many of you all are a lot younger than that, but that's the group I grew up with. Black Bart. Anyway, guys, if we call it by name, we can do something about it. So some of the material that I pull to lecture from, or to, in this case, kind of launch off from, because everybody's talking about maybe psychology and how to adjust around their problems, but nobody talks about how to really put them to bed and what we do to go on once we recognize something. We are going to talk about that. We're going to also tear down a lot of these ideas because they simply aren't true. And part of this is waking up to the way the world really is, with the way energy really is, and by the way God really is. And guys, I'm not talking about the God of the church or anything else. I guess I am on some level, but to me, God is much bigger than any dogma. It's humongous. It's energy. It's energy that is all you are, and in you to create with, to work with, energy to communicate with you through. And so what we do is, because we've learned these control issues as a kid, we're doing that. We're locked into that. It is, an entrenched reaction to whatever is happening out there that is similar to what happened to us in the past. And do you think anything like the great creator, the great co-creator with you, can get through to tell you anything? Absolutely not. We've got to challenge this and realize there's a better way. And it's a subtle shift, because these things, as you just heard, you fall easily into old patterns that you don't even know are old patterns. That's why we are putting words to them. You understand? Now, a lot of the articles that I found on the internet are putting words to them, but they're putting general words to them. How about abandonment? That's a good word. Abandonment. All right. What does it mean in your life? Who abandoned you? How did they abandon you? What did you do with it? See, everything comes back to you. Everything comes back to what did you do with it. If you're abandoned, emotionally abandoned, if your dad's too busy to look in your direction, or too busy to notice what you're doing. Hi. Hello, Larry. I'm so glad you're with us today, too. If your dad, we are doing something with that as kids. And by the way, it's perfectly natural for kids to make it all about themselves. It is all about themselves as kids. That's the time in our lives where it's all about us, because we don't know who we are. You see? So we make it all about us. Our dad is working too hard because I'm not valuable, or my work isn't valuable, or I'm not anything. And if I was anything, he wouldn't do that. Well, is that really true? No, it's bull. No, it's bull. And that's a real simple one. Some of these things are not so simple. We have a tendency, remember, that we have a tendency psychologically to make good things bad and bad things good in our psychology. You see? As a matter of fact, Jay says control is a lack of self-responsibility. And I'll say that is true because I think responsibility has a lot to do with this. I think self-control is also insecurity, of course, needing to control. Now, here's the interesting thing about this. First of all, you don't have control issues. Isn't that good? What you do have is a lack of control issues. You understand? Hello, Janice. Aren't you sweet? What a lovely thing that is. Thank you, Janice. You have a lack of control issues, not control issues. You go through life saying, I have money issues. No, it's a lack of money issues that we have. It's not control issues, all right? So let's call it what it is, lack of control issues. You feel out of control, and therefore you have to exert control. It's an overcompensation. When overcompensating for it's kind of the wrong path to take to heal this. The path to take to heal this is to see what it is. Not run away from it, not avoid it, put our arms around it, say, oh, you poor little thing, I see why you did it. But there are other choices now that I'm going to present to you. To think, to believe, to act on. Okay, so because we don't take, going along with what Jay said, responsibility to create our lives in this moment and in the next and in the next. It is about the literal moment, the sacred moment that you're in. We control because we feel powerless to do so. You understand? That's the whole reason for it. I'm going to give you more reasons. And we're going to give you more demonstrations of how this looks in the real world. But believe you me, I'm calling you out on these things. Because everything can be changed. Why? Why can everything be changed? Because it's all energy. That's why everything is energy. So your mind can be changed. And if your mind is changed, your behavior changes, your energy changes, your mind changes, your behavior changes, and your feelings. And you do different things. And it'll have a different life, a better life. Okay. Keep in mind that this is extremely important. I said this last time we were together, about 3 weeks ago. You don't need to have control. You don't need control. You don't try to control. What you need, and what everybody needs, it's a very human thing, is a sense of control. You've gotten those things mixed up. If you have control issues, you've gotten those things mixed up. Every human being walking the planet needs to have a sense of control, a sense of being in charge of their own life, even if they, by the way, don't. Because sometimes we can assign that control to somebody else. We'll talk about that in just a minute. I have a few things to say. It's enormously important for you to realize that it's healthy and good to have a sense of control. I have a sense that I'm in charge of my life, not in charge of you, not in charge of my team, not in charge. I have a sense of being in control of me. I make decisions for me. I tune in and know what I need. But you see, people that are exerting the ego child's mind control are trying to control everything around them because they're not doing that. That's what I want you to understand. Okay. we feel like we're controlling things when, and I want to go through this list. I found it on the internet under a sense of control. Gosh, who is the writer on this? I don't even think I have the writer on this. Well, forgive me. I thought you were great. Okay. Things that lead to a sense of control is a sense of certainty. Guys, there is no such thing. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to knock every point down. All right? There is no certainty in the world that is not you as God and the way God's energy works through you and through all things. That's predictable in a way. Listen to Creating the Life You Want, or get my book on, what is it called? The Life You Want. There you go. I knew it was in there somewhere. It was my first book. It'll explain it in a lot of detail. But there is no sense of certainty, guys. You see, everybody, the human race, thinks they need a sense of certainty. And Jay says, when we were children, our parents were in control. Then our minds grew up. We searched for leaders to control us. Yeah, you're going to hear about that in just a minute. Because it feels safe with certainty. Yeah. So here we are as a nation. We've never lived in this chaos before in my lifetime. And people come along that are congressmen and presidents and nominees and candidates and for House of Representatives and everything, mayors and everything else, and they seem real certain. I'm going to tell you now, one of my big things that I work with people on is everybody voting out of issues, because you need to be the one that is making an informed decision in your clarity and the best you can do in the moment without handing over your need for certainty to someone else, because what you're handing over is control of your own life. Guys, you can't do that. But we did. I mean, Jay just said it. We did that with our parents. We did that with certain teachers. Some of them actually betrayed us. Parents and teachers, friends. Well, what do you think that is? Do you think they betrayed you because you're a bad person? No, they betrayed you because that's not the way it's supposed to work anyway. You're supposed to find it in you. This is the age for individual consciousness, nothing else. Hi, April. Oh, aren't you sweet? Sending love to you too, my darling. I'm so glad you're with us today. A sense of certainty. You see, when we don't have, we look for that in someone else. Somebody's got to be sure, because we're not. But what if you were? Eyes to see the issues, Jay says. Do you see them in your micro and macro world? Very good point. Thank you very much. What I want you all to wake up to is the fact that, you guys, you have the power to have a sense of control in you because you listen to the inner. You listen to your highest self. I'm going to tell you right now, we all struggle with the ego child's mind. We all do. It's perfectly natural. Do not beat it up. It is the undeveloped part of the larger system. Okay, remember the threshold exercise I've given you all in the past. If you want to know what that is, if we have some new people today, just ask, write it to me, and we'll be glad to tell you. So you're the one that's got to be certain, kids. You're the one that's got to know. You're the one that has to stand in what you know today, in this moment, but have an open mind, because it may change. It may deepen. It may grow. But you're the one with the certainty. You see, look at our news reports. Look at this. Oh, my God. All over the media. Pundits. Oh, somebody sneezes. What does it mean to the country? Somebody does this. Somebody does this. What could it mean? What can it mean? Well, I say, call me and let me know when we get there. Because that's just a waste of energy and time that you can be applying to your own wonderful life to create what you want. Okay? Yeah. And as Jay says, it's easy to be controlled when you don't have this inside, when you are still looking for a savior. There's a syndrome I often work with called the victim, martyr, savior syndrome. By the way, all of those things are the same thing, because if you're going to make yourself the savior, you've made yourself the victim, right? All this in the ego child's mind. You've made yourself the martyr, you've made yourself the victim. Guys, don't play that game. Let's wake up, all right? A sense of certainty. There is no certainty that is not God through you. Listen to that. If you're not listening to that, you're doing some of these other things that we're going to challenge you with, and I want you to write them down and realize, and we'll tell you how to get over this, and realize that you can get over this. You see? Good. Secondly, we feel like we're controlling things when there is a completion of outstanding things, so we don't have to worry about them. All right? I loved this one. I had one of my clients say something very similar to this. Hang on a second. She says, I want everything that has the potential for hurting me or is hurting me resolved quickly, so I rush to outcomes. It doesn't even have to be hurting. It could be fearful. She rushes to make friends with people by people-pleasing, giving herself away. We'll talk about that too. I've got quite the list. Not just for her, but for others. Instead of letting a relationship develop organically, because she's so afraid of being hurt. She can get her to like, if these people to like her, she won't be hurt. But who says she's going to be hurt? Only her little child's mind. So what mind is she in? You see? Guys, you're going to live better. Listen to this. Big running lights all around this. You're going to live better. You're going to have more. This is where peace reigns, in your highest self mind. Don't fool yourself. It's work to get there, to resolve a lot of this stuff. You see? Thank you, Jay. You are so dear. And it's really interesting because we all that have been on some sort of intuitive journey our lives to understand us have sought. I mean, it used to be a phrase in the 70s, we seek an alternate reality. Well, let me tell you something, kids. You're in the alternate reality when you're in the ego child's mind. That's not the real self. That's the false self. The real self is stripped away, listening to this incredible energy that you are, that's in touch with something far beyond your conscious mind, and going with in full cooperation. All right, moving on. Again, let me repeat that last one. What we do is try to complete outstanding things so we don't have to worry about them. We don't give relationships time to develop either, because we're rushing to have somebody like us, somebody validate us, somebody say we're worth something, and then you can show it to other people that you're worth something because somebody believes in you. It's just a zero-sum game, kids. You are born with everything in you now, but you've got to wake up to it and use it and see who you are. Jay has a question. Do we have to admit we are being controlled before we take action to do something about it? Well, there's something, darling, basically wrong with that question, because you're not being controlled. You are controlling, right? And yes, As a matter of fact, what consciousness is being conscious of what you're doing so you don't do that anymore. There's a simple explanation for this, right? That's what consciousness is, being more conscious today than you were yesterday of something, or several somethings. So yes. Okay. This isn't just about wanting to feel better, is it? We can want to feel better without understanding what I'm doing energetically in your sessions. But if you want to be conscious, if you want to be one of the people in the world that bring light and understanding and help in some way, even just energetically moving through the crowd, let me tell you, there's a conscious understanding that must go along with it. Interesting. Because my next point is we feel like we're controlling things when we understand how things work. Now, what am I talking about when I said you've got to understand in consciousness what you're doing and that you have other choices, and understanding how things work? Well, understanding how things work in the ego child's mind is just beating yourself up for not knowing. And any subject will do. You beat yourself up for not knowing about your physical health and why you didn't see a cold or a COVID coming. You beat yourself up because you don't know how something works. Well, hey, look, like technology, for example, that's a good one, all right? But you drive a car and you don't know how that works. Most of you don't. You watch television, you don't know how that works. Most of you don't. Why aren't you beating yourself up about those things? Because they're the norm. You beat yourself up about things that you don't understand that you need, or that, like technology or something else. Hey, that old consciousness thing Jay said. You're such a cutie. Darlings, everybody can't understand everything, you know? But what you do and what life is about is be open to information. It comes. Know who to call and ask. It comes. Talk to a therapist who's supposed to know more than you are about this subject. It comes. You know, I had a client that was, a financial advisor. And when the world started going super wacky, he was very, very anxious all the time. And I said, but why? And what it was is he thought he ought to have all the definitive answers. And I said, but you're not God. You're just an aspect of God. And here's what you're hired for by people that use you. You know a little more than other people do about your subject. That's it. Do the best you can and adopt that, because you're not God and you're not going to know everything and you're not going to know how the world turns. Come on. This is a time of chaos. This chaos is serving us because it's getting us talking, it's getting us deepening, it's getting us past the child's mind. We're in the chaos part right now. And chaos always precedes new order. And the chaos is probably going to continue, certainly for the rest of my life, probably for the rest of yours. So we've got to get used to it and find the answers within. It is a time for individual consciousness, not somebody else's consciousness telling us what to do. Hello, Janice. Yes, set your boundaries and use your God-given gifts. That's what Janice says, and I think that's absolutely right. The interesting thing is one of the God-given gifts that we are giving that we don't use in the ego child's mind is discernment. The ability to discern what people's motives are, what's going on, past the obvious, past the appearances. Why do we not use discernment? Because when we were kids, we formed our lives up to 7 or 8 years old based on appearances. Then we have a secondary patterning that cements what we saw in place and goes up to about 12. By that time, we are so fully cooked. We have these ideas implanted the way they are. Now, you're listening to a show like this to root them out. Okay? All right. Understanding how things work. Here's the interesting thing. You just don't need to know how it all works. You need to know the principles. For example, when you're creating something, when you're manifesting something, things come to you through the least resistant ways. That's why a lot of times information, a lottery number, God knows what, is given to you in your sleep because your conscious mind is out of the way that says, I can't do that, I don't know that, that's not. You know, all the other things we say to ourselves. I read an article on that actor, Mark Ruffalo, right? I like him a lot. He's a marvelous actor. And he seems like such a nice person. I don't know. Everybody gets to be the way they are. But I read an interesting article that said he had a dream, and the dream told him he had a brain tumor. And he went to the doctor, and he says, I know this seems strange, but I had a dream. I have a brain tumor. And the guy said, I think you're crazy as a loon, but I'll order an MRI just to make you feel better. And there was a brain tumor. This is not odd. Things like this are happening to me, to my friends all the time, thank God. Not about brain tumors, but about other things. We're always told if we're listening. So what's in the way of listening? All this. What we're talking about right now. The understanding you need is how God works. Aren't you sweet? Thank you so much for that. The understanding you need is God is energy and how it all works and how you can participate in that current, that flow of marvelous divine life and why you're here and how sacred this moment is and really cooperating with this energy. Listen to those things I gave shows several weeks ago on creating the life you want. Get the book, The Life You Want, and it has several chapters in there like that. There was an old book years ago by Joseph Murphy called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. Very simple, how to create the life you want. Very hard because these are in the way. That's why I start with what I've got. Dear churches, like the science of mind, that is not, by the way, Scientology. The science of mind is based on principles that essentially say, as you think, so your life becomes. Okay, that's lovely. But what happens is people are rah, and so thrilled about joining that church, and then they can't do it because of this. Because issues pull them down, you see? Okay. Sweeties, you don't have to understand how everything in the world works. You have to listen to God as you. The aspect of God, all of God, the low vibrations and the high vibrations, everything is God. It's all in you. Your journey to consciousness is going from the fear-based self to the love-based self. You'll listen more and more. And that's where the answers specifically for this moment and you lie. The next way we control is predicting what will happen. We need a prediction. I will never forget one very charming little lady. I wonder if she's even still living. She was very much in fantasy about everything. And she came to me maybe one time, maybe twice, but I think it was once. Years and years and years ago, and she walked in and she said, I've been working on myself my whole life. And I said, really, what have you been doing? And she said, I have gone to see a psychic every single month of my life since I was like 15 years old. She was in her 50s now. And I thought, wow, I don't think this woman has the right therapist, because I'm not going to let you have that. That's somebody else telling you. That's somebody else telling you what to do. That's not you controlling your life. There's no destiny out there except what you create. What's in you, your potential, there's your destiny. Some people get there and some people don't. Are they going to be brave enough to look at all this crap and face it? You know, I say the same thing. You know, I work with actors a lot. Used to have an acting school in Atlanta when I lived there years ago. And actors would, and quite serious, dear little people would call me and come to my classes and then always ask, do I have what it takes to be an actor? And I would always say, if you're talking about talent, you wouldn't even be here. You wouldn't even seek me out if you didn't have the talent. But do you have the courage? Do you have the guts to face in you what's wrong and bring up your entrails and pour them out on the desk for people to pick through? Do you have that kind of courage? Do you have the courage to know yourself so well that everything that you put out there in terms of a gift for others is sincere, is genuine? Are you courageous enough to let everybody do with it as they will? Because they're going to take it and do something else with it. They're going to interpret it their way. Is that all right with you? It's not all right with you if you're trying to control anything. So you have to act for the right reasons. And let me say one other thing. Guys, you have to live for the right reasons. To be happy, fully, right? One other thing that is on this list is trying to make people and things consistent. Consistent. I'm going to go someplace else with that in just a minute. Consistent. Nothing's consistent, guys, except the energy of God. Learn how to use it. Learn what it is. Nothing's consistent except that. And even that isn't consistent, because in my book, God is an infinite and ever-expanding set of truths always in motion. There's always more to learn. If you're not consistent with learning, if you're not compatible with learning more and deepening and growing, and what do you think you're doing? Trying to make things consistent? Trying to make tomorrow the same as it was today so you can feel safe? The safety that you seek is in knowing how God's working, being part of that system on the highest level. There's the safety. Jay, I love that. He says, when you are controlling, you are like a bug ready to be squashed. Well, in a way, that's true. You're waiting, you're in a protective mode, all right? You're waiting for the other shoe to drop, the piano to fall on your head, the whatever. And that's a form of hell, I think. Okay. I'm going to go one place else with that, and that is that I think that one of the issues that is common too is that we try to make life fair. Guys, life isn't fair. Stop trying to make life fair and create anything you want. Little different mindset, right? Ego, child's mind. I'm trying to make everything fair. Make sure I get my share. In the higher self, you just know you create everything. Now go get it. Learn what you need to learn. Do what you need to do. Explore your talents, gifts, and abilities. Add value. Go do that. Don't try to make everything fair like a kid. Just doesn't make any sense. Okay. You don't need to be in control all the time. You just don't need to be in control. You need to have a sense of control, and that means working from the inside out. working from the inside out. I'll give you an example of that. So a dear friend of mine who is now passed got a very life-threatening disease. One of my dear, dear friends rushed over, lived with her, and helped her. But at one point, she realized she'd stepped over the line. She was managing all the medications. She was managing everything, managing what she ate, managing the medications, managing. Until she realized, and she did realize it at one point, that she was taking away my darling friend's sense of control. And that she needed to have a sense of control. And she needed to have a right to live and die the way she chose. If she abused her medications, if she chose to eat correctly or not, that those things mattered to her, that she had a sense of control. And sure enough, her behavior kind of started straightening out, and she stopped acting out when she had that sense of control. She didn't make the decisions, by the way, that we were hoping that she would make in terms of taking care of herself. But we were left, after she passed, with the peace that she had done it her way. It wasn't our way, but it was her way. And that we didn't love her enough unless we were at peace with that too. And so we became so. Okay. Now, I want to go back to one thing, which is that our parents had the power of control at one point because we were kids. It is normal for a child to trust their parents even if they're not trustworthy, okay? And to give them, because they're going to take it anyway, a sense of control. But, ladies and gentlemen, I can't tell you how important it is to wake up as adults and to realize that we have got to live from our authentic selves. We can't be looking as voters, for example, for somebody to take care of us. We can't be looking as voters for somebody to be more certain than we are. Because we are depending on them for a sense of control. And we have handed over our power just as clearly as if we reached out to them with our hands and dumped it in their lap. Please don't do that. Ask yourself why you vote for the people you vote for. Is it because they seem so sure and you're not? Then it's time not to vote for them, but to make yourself sure by contacting the inner God that you are. That's the aspect. You know, it's as if we are all, if God is a prism, we're all refracted light of that prism, every one of us. You are the aspect of you, of God. It's the same thing. But it's either in the ego, child's mind, fear-based self, or you're expressing that through the highest self. I hope you're understanding this. People who have an internal focus and are controlling from the internal and from this highest self are more proactive, and more self-motivated. And people who are in the ego child's mind self are more passive. And they believe in psychics. Not that there's no such thing as that, because we all are intuitive, of course. But nobody should have that kind of power and control over you. You've got it. I'm reading what Jay is saying. How are some ways to recognize and break free from the parental control beliefs instilled in us when we were a child? When you're a child, you only see what the child sees. When you're in the child's mind, there is nothing else. That's why one just does not wake up without help and says, I have all of these choices I could make, and this is my only choice is the child's mind, and I keep going through that door. What's with that? We actually have to almost have somebody pointing that out, giving us permission until we have it within us to choose a different door to go through. The ego child's mind can only see itself. The highest self mind knows the whole system. It sees the ego child's mind and knows the highest self mind. That's why when you do these things and you give in to your issues, all of you is participating in that. The ego child's mind is participating in that because it's the only door they've convinced themselves to go through. It's your only option. The higher self mind has brought it in because it's hoping that you'll face it and get over it. So the whole being of you is participating in these patterns and these things coming around again. So what was instilled in us when we were children is not the ability to get out of these things. But there is one niggling thing there that helps us get out. And that is you were born undeveloped love. The undeveloped whole. And for some of us, when we are born and we are that, and we see our circumstances, these things aren't compatible. And it creates a restlessness in us that in the future sometimes drives us to ask more questions beyond what's traditional, beyond what our parents believed. And that's consciousness. You see? The deepening of these truths that are all God and all grace. Okay. Moving right along. Great question, Jay. So here's some examples of exerting control over others. Now, these are broad. I'm not going to let you stay there. I'm going to give you some things that actually might be yours, okay? But here are those things. Micromanagement. That's a good one. We have to manage every little thing. You don't trust anybody, of course. Number 2, keeping a person from seeing and talking to loved ones or friends. You hear that a lot of times with toxic narcissists. They cut somebody off from other people. Gaslighting. You all understand what gaslighting is? Okay. We've done, I believe, some shows on gaslighting. If not, I'll be glad to redo some. Dishonesty, lying, manipulating. Overprotectiveness or helicopter parenting. Coming in, leaving. Coming in, leaving. Physical, sexual, or emotional abuse, bullying is part of this. Taunting, mocking, all of those things, right? Some examples that they give in this article of controlling the environment, or the self, by the way, is disordered eating, bulimia, anorexia, compulsive exercising, self-harm, cutting, for example, substance abuse, or compulsive arranging, tidying, cleaning. Helps you have a sense of control when you feel out of control. Do know that all of these behaviors, all of these things that you do are absolutely seen by somebody who's looking and who recognizes them for what they are. All you need is one person to say, what are they motivated by? And you're exposed. Now, that shouldn't make you more afraid. That should make you want to get rid of these things because they're gotten rid of because they're just energy. And when you are in the highest self, these things don't exist. Discernment exists. Seeing everybody's motivation exists. Having incredible insights exists there. Being aware that this is a sacred moment and you're making the most of it exists there. Knowing how you feel and calling your feelings by name exists there because you're aware. And much, much more. Okay. Control issues can be created by, talking about the childhood, this is all in the childhood now, traumatic or abusive life experiences. Thank you, Denise. A lack of trust. If your parents were not trustworthy. By the way, we think that we have to have trauma in our life, and perhaps we ought to expand the idea of what trauma really is to a child. Trauma may be to a child a little infant that's hungry that's not fed on time. You parents may have a perfectly good reason for not feeding you on time. Their mother may die, right? So they have to do that instead of feeding you on time, and they're 2 hours late feeding you. Oh my God. The child who doesn't have a developed thought, who is just going from this moment, I'm uncomfortable, says, I'll never be fed again. I'll never eat again. I'm going to die. Expand your minds, guys, because certainly trauma and abuse happens in families. But if you think you had a perfectly fine family and nothing like that went on, yes, it did, on a more subtle level. And guys, it isn't what happened to you that's the problem. It's the wound itself. Don't you understand? A kid that's called fat in front of his friends has been just as wounded as somebody who is raped in a barn. Not to diminish either experience. I'm saying it is the wound that matters, not what comprised the wound. I know that's a hard concept to get. Okay. Certainly, control issues may be related to anxiety. If you came from a very uncertain home, if your mother and father were anxious, you would have inherited that. And certainly certain life experiences. If you had a sibling that was chronically torturing you, I'd be anxious too. Fears of abandonment itself, desertion. What's the difference to me? Abandonment in my work means an emotional abandonment. Desertion means a physical abandonment. Low or damaged self-esteem. A person's beliefs, values, and faiths. And what do I mean by that? Well, there are a lot of things on television right now about cults, right? Sometimes our families are cults. Sometimes, I often talk to people who came from a fundamentalist background, and oftentimes the fundamentalist background control them. Now, keep in mind that there have been studies that have been done on this, and they find that a lot of these very, very fundamental, whether it's a cult or not, but very fundamental churches that have rigid belief systems and demand that their people adhere to those, are very fear-based. You get it? They're very fear-based. They're very controlling. People are drawn to that have never grown up inside and don't know they have to take responsibility for themselves. It's much easier to have a church or a system tell them what to do. Perfectionism and a fear of failure is also another way you control. That you try to be perfect. Oh God, it's going to be horrible if you're not perfect. Guys, there's no such thing. It's not even in your own mind. There's no such thing as perfection. It's only that you're living up to some sort of standard that's usually too high or is going to be achieved at great cost to you and who you are and what you want to do. You're going to end up resenting yourself and the fact that you went over your line. And there is perfection, and that is in God's energy and how it all works. It's the only perfection there is, and you'll never achieve it. Our perfection, our divinity, I should say, not our perfection, but our divinity, our highest self, is in the embracing of our ego child's mind and our humanness. Not in our knocking it away, not in our denying it, not in our banning it from existence in our minds. Okay, and another control issue is related to emotional sensitivity and the fear of experiencing painful emotions. Guys, you can't protect yourself from that. Those of you who want a relationship, let me tell you that that's the greatest teacher there is. It's going to ultimately reveal your unlovingness in all sorts of ways to both partners. And you can stay there and resent the hell out of it or get divorced or anything else, or you can realize what you're doing and change that back into more love, realizing that love is a privilege and you have to work on it. And that the things that so bother you in the ego child's mind don't exist in the higher self mind. And that you have choices. You see, instead of control, what most of you seek is I never can pronounce this word, efficacy. Did I pronounce it right? No, I didn't pronounce it right. Let me just say it's a term that describes one's belief that you can take action to meet a challenge. I can never pronounce it. You know, there's some words that I really can't pronounce. My husband's Austrian. Forget German. I mean, you know, a word that starts PF something. No way. I just can't do it. Well, this is another one. Guys, you have to be aware. You have to have the belief that you've got what's in you to meet every challenge. Oh, Denise, this is a good note. She said, oh my God, I could write a book growing up with 11 siblings on a farm, 10 girls and 2 boys. Write that book, Denise. Write that book. That's absolutely right. Guys, I'm going to react to your growing up on the farm thing too, Denise. Because do you know, when you're a little kid, you relate more to animals than you do to people. So what happens when your cats run over? Or that you all are butchering animals because you have to eat? Or any of those other things that go on a farm? That's you. You learn pretty fast that life is scary. And your life can be over like that because your cat's was. You see? This is really important because we grow up with certain ideas in our minds, and we have to ultimately say, do I really want to believe that? Is that really true? Or is there just this marvelous coming and going in life? Does life continue? What's going on here? Okay. So what I want to say is being able to overcome challenges, work through problems, is quite different from controlling your circumstances. Do you understand that? Tune into that, please. They're different uses of energy, but they're right side by side. And if you step over that line, you're going to have controlling behaviors. If you keep on this side of the line, you'll realize you're working through a problem. You're trying to find the information you need to work through that problem. You're getting smarter and wiser and better, and you're going to be all right. You've just got to keep going. Can you hear the difference? Let me say it again. Being able to overcome a challenge is much different than controlling circumstances. But you see, as a child, if you have in your child's mind, I've got to have an understanding of everything. I've got to have an understanding of everything, or I'm no good. That's of course, the thing that's underneath all this, right? Or I'm not worth anything if I don't understand everything. You're never going to ask for help and learn how to overcome a challenge. Do you get this? You're never going to, if you think you have to know everything, you don't. So come on, let's get over that issue and let's go get the information that's going to help you overcome the challenge. We sabotage ourselves, guys. Denise says, absolutely, I had to take care of the chickens, and one was butchered. And when one was butchered, I cried all night because they were my little friends. Yeah. I had a dear friend that married a man who had a farm, and they had bunny rabbits. Oh, my God, I love rabbits. I love everything. There's not an animal that I don't love. And they had a red-headed rabbit, as red-headed as me or more, okay? And I love that rabbit. Every time I went to the farm, I loved that rabbit. One day that rabbit was missing. Broke my heart. I cried for a week, too. Guys, your issues are not singular. They form a pattern, a web, that every issue supports every other issue. That's why you don't ask for help, so you don't know more, and you feel like you can't deal with things. You don't know what the truth is. I should know. I'm hiding my ignorance. Okay. It's going to sabotage you. I read something on the internet the other day. It was just a thread. Somebody said, yes, we should all be children. No, we should not be all children. I think that innocence and being open is lovely. Being stupid because we are thinking of nothing but like a child because we don't know and we are adults, that's dumb, guys. We've got to come out of our ignorance. We've got to realize, no, there's more to learn and more to know, and I don't know it all. Why isn't that all right? Why isn't just saying I don't know all right? It's because of what you do with it. There's a self-attack in there. If I don't know, I'm stupid. If I don't know, I've been stupid all my life. If I don't know, I'm a kid. If I don't know, I'm not worthy. If I don't know, I'm not worthy of love. And you can just keep going. Nobody's stupid here. You're seeking answers right now For God's sake. One of them is to just go out and get what you don't know. Talk to people who know. Okay. There's a lot of evidence that says that struggling to control things does not lead to a happy life. But the opposite is true. Okay? Now, yeah, Denise, I still don't eat chicken very much. I really got to tell you, unless it's thoroughly disguised, I don't eat chicken, and I never eat rabbit. And all due respect people that do. I've laughed that I came back from the last Pan Am flight from France, and they served us chicken on that flight. And it was not good chicken, and my first husband and I threw up for 3 days. It was horrible. So, okay, let's now go into some detail, okay? So, I did an exercise with my advanced class. My advanced class, very aware people, some of whom are listed as healers on my website, marthanovak.com. And I said, let's talk about the specific ways you are sabotaging yourself. And then I said, do you see that all of this is control? Sabotage just is control. That's all it is. So they've come up with a very good list of little tiny picky things. I want to share these things with you. I sabotage myself with confusion, negative thinking, procrastination, worry, or I'll shut down my emotions. I'll experience anxiety. I'll go into mania to convince myself to keep going, or I will make it very dramatic. You want that list again? Because some of this is you. Some of this is all of us. I sabotage myself. I control with confusion. Confusion's an issue, guys. Nobody's confused. But we'll say, I'm so confused, because we don't want to hear the truth. Don't you understand? That's all confusion is. There's no such thing as confusion. It's when we confuse ourselves. That's when we say we're confused. It's a way to say, talk to the hand. Okay. I'll negative think. That's another way to control things. If I negative think, I say this is the way it's going to turn out. I'm ready for the trauma of it, right? I procrastinate. I'll think about that tomorrow. Won't think about it today. That's a way to control. I worry. That's another way to control. I've got to think of all the things that can go wrong, because I'm often wrong. Really? That's not true. I shut down. I've noticed for years, I can even hear it on the phone when I'm talking to somebody. And if I say something that's really challenging to them in a session, they're just not there. They'll say, oh, okay. And I know that it's devastating, what we're talking about. And they'll go, oh, yeah. That's shut down, kids. That's you just going somewhere else and not even being aware of how powerful what you're trying to avoid is for you. You're not ready for it. So that's shutdown, emotional shutdown, not feeling anything. Curtain falls. Okay? Anxiety. I control through anxiety. Keeps me safe. See, here's the problem. Every time you use any of this, these things entrench. And your ego child's mind likes that entrenchment, because then you're not going to get out of it. You're going to convince yourself. It convinces you every time that you need to use it again and again and again when certain circumstances present, I should say. Right? But here's the thing. Every time you do that, it makes you more anxious. Why? Because you're indulging in the ego child's mind and not in the higher self. You get that? You're never going to feel good if you're on a conscious journey and you keep doing the ego child's mind stuff. You got to realize There's another choice to make here. A lot of choices to make here. And I don't, keep in mind, as a therapist, I don't mind you making ego-child's mind choices. I'm not going to judge you for that. I'm going to push you to make other choices. But you'll make them as long as you need to make them. It just means I got to go find some other ties to why you're doing that over and over and over again. Okay? The other thing I want you to realize about anxiety is this. When you do make those other choices, higher self, higher mind choices, guess what? You're going to experience some anxiety there too. But which is better for you? And if you will make those higher mind choices, and the anxiety with those things, once that momentum takes over, the anxiety will go away. It will never go away in the ego-child's mind choices. You're going to just have it over and over and over again. Get it? Okay. But why, when you're trying to be in your higher mind, do you have anxiety over those choices? Well, because it's different. And the ego-child's mind likes the familiar. Okay. Mania. We often hear mania connected with bipolar disorder, but or narcissism or personality disorder. So I'm going to tell you, I never liked that word disorder because, first of all, these disordered are more ordered than normal, not less ordered than normal. They are mounting a tremendous defense. But mania doesn't have to be connected to a personality disorder either. Sometimes we just get in mania because we're pushing too hard, we've gone over the line, we're not considering ourselves, we're not taking care of ourselves well, and we keep pushing, and there comes the mania to help us. It kind of adds to whatever fuel we're putting into the fire that the ego-child's mind feels it's necessary. The interesting thing about mania is you're just going to have to wait till it's over if you let yourself go in it. You're not going to hear any good sense there. You're not going to hear anything except what you're doing. That's the whole purpose of mania. Okay? So if you know someone in mania or you suffer in mania, realize you're in it and just try to start bringing yourself down in all sorts of ways, through meditation, anxiety, tapes, anything that'll bring the energy down. And over time, it'll come down and you'll be out of it. It's a very important thing to not use. We use it because we're trying to control. You are using it to control. There's certain manias that even scare other people. Oh, that's control. Drama. Drama's related to this, certainly, but it's its own thing. You can make things very histrionic, very dramatic, when it's not dramatic at all. And you make things dramatic to control things, to get a different response from somebody than you think you might not get, than you think you might get it. You see? Okay. Going on with this. I go into overdrive. Overdrive is an energy that's not quite mania, but it means, the machine's turning, the wheels are turning, let's just work real hard, let's go into overdrive. I go into fantasy. Fantasy is its own reward. It's not real. You can't create a damn thing out of it. And yet you tell yourself you can. And make things worse or better than they are. In other words, you're going to diminish, you're going to inflate. You don't see things realistically. That's all control. Here's another one that she's listed. I am defiant and full of rage. What are you so mad at? You're mad at your past. You're mad at mother. You're mad at dad. You're mad at your brother, your sister. You're mad at your school chums. You're mad at somebody. You're mad at God because God didn't do what it said, which was give you everything. Really? Have you looked inside lately? Guys, God did give you everything. It's inside, laid out there like it's on a tool table. You just simply aren't picking it up. How you can hammer the nail if you don't pick up the hammer. You see? But defiance and holding on to it and being full of rage gives you fuel when you feel you're powerless. Do you understand? Fuel makes you a force. Resentment's the same way. So when you finally overgive, right, and you get real resentful, that feels like fuel too. Do you want that kind of fuel? Or would you rather just relax? And here's the interesting thing. I've worked with a lot of people who have mania, and they think they're accomplishing a lot in mania, in overdrive, in defiance. They makes them work, gets them busy, motivates them. But do they do their best work there? Are they balanced? Can they see things? Do they let inspiration, divine inspiration, in that state? Of course you do not. You're just enduring, not really living. You get it. She goes on to say, I carry shame and stay in hiding and isolating and stay invisible. I withdraw. I don't let people see that shame when they get too close. Well, let's face the shame. Everybody's ashamed of something. It's not real. It's just a feeling. And feelings aren't truth. They're signposts that say, look here. It's like Alice in Wonderland that said, found the bottle, and it says, open me, drink me, or whatever it said. Okay, all right. But what we do when we feel shame is we hide it even from ourselves. We won't explore it. All these things need to be explored, kids. You had a good reason to do this. I'm not saying you don't have a good reason to do this. I'm looking at my time. All this also, I want you to realize, it's not taking responsibility for yourself, for this moment of marvelous energy and creation. If you're doing this, you're doing something else with the energy, you see. She goes on to say, I'm avoidant, resistant to God, change, and authority. And what I want to say to you is there's a neutrality that we must find within. Not a resistance. It's a neutrality within the self that's full of discernment and just watches people. They all get to be exactly like they are. You just need to see it, and then you'll know what to do. We can't block people out. Just because we had a forceful mother or father does not mean we have to, and at one point in our life, we saw God as them, does not mean we have to keep doing it, does it? Why are we reacting to authority? And change is just the movement of God. It's trying to lead us to our good. That line from the Bible is true. Everything works for our good if we let it. I've got a sign on my refrigerator. It's so cute. I don't know who said it. I think it's anonymous. It said, everything will turn out okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. But what do? We shut our energy down because we say, see, that's just like my old belief, my issue. It's the end. And if we will just say, oh, well, okay, this isn't the end. Let's see what else is out there. What else is coming? Sure enough, blessings come. Come on, guys. Listen to the energies. Read the book on creating the life you want and how to keep the energy going. Keep the energy going. The next one. And guys, you can't be avoidant. Let me touch on that subject a minute. You can't be avoidant about anything. Is there a word you don't like? You're being avoidant. Because all words are God, you see? All words are God. I love that Flannery O'Connor thing. She was a writer. She wrote all these grotesqueries, and a writer came along, a reporter came along and said, how can you resolve the fact that you write grotesqueries and yet you say you're such a strong Catholic and a spiritual person? And she said, sometimes you show the grace of God by showing the lack of it. Well, what story do you think I tell my actors if they come in and say, oh, I can't say that bad word? All words are God. All words are God. They're just high and low versions of that, from the ego child's mind and from the highest self mind. That's all. But we can't be afraid of anything, guys. The next one. I am afraid of being vulnerable and out of control. That's why you mount such protection of control. You see, you're not going to be out of control. What do you think? You're going to go postal because you haven't exercised the rage in you yet. Let's exercise that. Let's see why. Let's listen to yourself to see why you're so enraged. You had a good reason, but I'm not going to let you stay there. Okay. She says, I need to add creative action and gratitude to my life, but I ignore them. I run past them. And instead, I try to get back to fantasy because that's the only way I'm going to get anything. You're not going to get anything through fantasy, guys. That's just what you're telling yourself. All these ways and more you are trying to control. Now, I'd like to go into, we are just about out of time for today, guys, but what I'm going to do is to go through a much more detailed list next time. Here's how to deal with what I've just given you and how to deal with what I'm going to give you next week. Identify these behaviors. Write down the ones you're doing. Number 2, what was the trigger for them? Look back in the last 24 to 36 hours and see what pissed you off. It may be more than one thing. Write those things down. Don't tell yourself, I shouldn't be bothered by this. I'm a spiritual person. I shouldn't feel this. Don't do that to yourself. You be honest. Number 3, we have to be tolerant of the unknown. And I want you to develop skills about not knowing. Nobody knows. That's the thing we're in right now. We are not supposed to know. You're supposed to develop a tolerance for not knowing. Why isn't that all right? You see, it is. The only thing you can tell to me about why it's not all right are those ego child's mind issues. Write those things down, please. Face those. Face that you feel that. And then do this exercise with those. Number 4, look at your
90 seconds
list of emotions. We've got to develop some emotional fluidity here, and the way you do that first is to be able to call emotions by name. Thank you. Thank you so much, Janice. Number 5, it's very important to have trusted friends that you can talk about this with. People who are on the same path that you are. And if you don't know those people, look on Meetup. Look at some of the meditation groups in your area. Look at everything like that.
60 seconds.
Identify your goals. Learn everything you can about what you want to do. And seek help if you find yourself continuing to be stuck. Guys, I pray for you right now that you may have some real clear ways to get on the other side of all this. And that you realize that God has you. And it's not the God that we thought, but the God that we are on the most loving aspects of ourselves. I love you very much. That God loves you, but only through you. So please open yourself to be in touch with it. We're going to talk about this in more detail next week.
10 seconds.
So see you next week, okay? And thank you, Denise, for your time as well. It's a good team we are, all of us. God bless you. Take care now. Bye-bye.